Okay, so you want to own a boat marina. Buy some waterfront land, build a dock, rent out boat slips by the month, and collect checks while you watch the sunset from your office. Maybe sell some gas. Maybe fix a few boats. Sounds like the last passive income business left in America. Here's what's interesting. In April 2025, Blackstone, one of the largest private equity firms on Earth, paid $5.65 billion to acquire Safe Harbor Marinas. That's 138 locations. They paid roughly 21 times the annual cash flow. That's not what passive income gets valued at. That's what irreplaceable infrastructure gets valued at. Wall Street sees something underneath the dock that most people walk right past. Let me show you what that is. A marina's revenue doesn't come from where you think it does. Slip rentals, the monthly fees boat owners pay to park in your water, account for only about 30 to 40% of total revenue. The rest comes from fuel sales, haul-out and storage, a repair shop, and marine retail. You're not buying a parking lot for boats. You're buying a waterfront business with 5 or 6 different ways to make money. But here's what makes a marina fundamentally different from almost any other business you could buy. You can't build a new one. A new marina requires federal permits from the Army Corps of Engineers to build anything in navigable waters, plus a state environmental review. That process takes a year or two and costs $50,000 to $250,000 in engineering and legal fees. And in most coastal states in 2026, the answer is no. They're not issuing new permits. The supply of marinas is frozen at whatever exists today, and the water your docks float on, you don't own it. In Florida and most coastal states, the submerged land beneath a marina belongs to the state government. You lease it through something called a Submerged Lands Lease, paying 15 cents to 40 cents per square foot per year for the right to put your pilings in the state's water. Your entire business sits on someone else's property. Now, the cost of getting in. A small inland marina on a lake, 50 to 100 slips with basic docks and a fuel pump, runs $2 million to $5 million. A mid-tier coastal marina with 200 slips, a repair shop, and a dry stack building, which is basically a vertical parking garage for boats where a forklift stacks them 4 or 5 levels high, runs $8 million to $20 million. Trophy marinas in South Florida or the Hamptons trade for $30 million to over $150 million. But the purchase price is just the entry ticket. Every wet slip, meaning a spot where the boat actually sits in the water, costs $20,000 to $60,000 to build or replace with standard floating docks. Heavy-duty concrete systems that survive hurricanes run around $100,000 per slip. The dry stack building costs about $25,000 per rack space, plus roughly $500,000 for the marine forklift. And then there's dredging. A marina basin silts in over time. Sand and sediment settle on the bottom. The water gets shallower, and eventually boats start grounding out. Every few years, you bring in a dredge to dig it back to navigable depth. That costs $150,000 to $1.5 million per campaign. You haven't sold a gallon of fuel yet, and you're already 7 figures deep. Now, let's talk about how this business actually makes money, because the operating economics don't work the way they look on paper. Slip rentals are the headline number. The national average runs $15 to $35 per foot per month. A 40-foot slip brings in roughly $1,000 a month. In South Florida, rates can top $100 per foot, so that same slip runs several grand monthly. Sounds like a cash flow machine. But after dock maintenance, insurance, property taxes, and staffing, the net margin on slip revenue alone is razor thin. The slip gets the boat owner through the gate. Everything that happens after they tie up is where you actually make money. Fuel is the first real profit center. A marina fuel dock charges about $1 per gallon above road prices. Your customers can't drive their boat to a gas station. You're the only fuel source for miles of open water. That's a captive market. A busy coastal marina sells $500,000 to $2.5 million a year in fuel. Gross margin runs around 15%. But at that volume, net profit hits a couple $100,000 a year. The catch is compliance. Store more than 1,320 gallons above ground, and you need a federal spill prevention plan, double-walled tanks, and an EPA-approved response protocol. One fuel leak into the waterway, and you're facing fines that start at $50,000 per day. For northern marinas, winter storage is the revenue that keeps the lights on during the off-season. You haul boats out with a travel lift, a crane that straddles the boat and lifts it straight out of the water at around $15 a linear foot. Then you charge about $50 per foot per season for outdoor storage with blocking and shrink wrap. Heated indoor storage runs well over $100 per foot. A single 50-foot boat sitting in your yard from November to April generates easily $5,000 or more. The boat just sits there. You barely touch it. That's close to pure margin, and for a New England marina with 150 boats in the yard, that winter revenue is what pays the mortgage through the frozen months. The repair shop is where the real money hides. Marine technicians bill over $150 an hour. Labor gross margin runs around 45%. Parts carry about a 30% markup. But the reason the repair shop prints money isn't the billing rate. It's the geography. Once someone is paying $1,200 a month to park at your marina, where do they get their bottom paint done? Where do they winterize their engine? Where do they fix the outdrive that started leaking last weekend? At your shop, because it's 50 feet from their boat. The slip fee is the Trojan horse. It keeps the customer on your property, and every maintenance need flows through your repair bay. Now, the fixed costs. Insurance in Florida runs $1,000 to $3,500 per slip per year. On a 200-slip marina, that adds up fast. And after Hurricane Ian in 2022, coastal premiums doubled or tripled in a single renewal cycle. The policy itself has a trap most new owners don't understand until they file a claim. It's called the Named Storm Deductible. In hurricane zone policies, the deductible isn't a flat dollar amount. It's a percentage of your total insured value, typically 5 to 10%. If your marina is insured for $10 million and a named storm hits, you cover the first $500,000 to $1 million out of pocket before the insurance company writes a check. That's not a deductible. That's a second mortgage. Staffing eats around 20% of gross revenue. A dockmaster runs about $80,000 a year. Marine techs cost about the same. Dredging comes back every few years, whether you're ready or not. Skip it, and the basin silts in. Boats ground out, customers leave, and your revenue drops to zero while the mortgage stays exactly where it was. Property taxes on waterfront land take another few percent of gross. Then layer on environmental compliance, spill prevention plans, stormwater monitoring, hazardous waste disposal. That stack adds tens of thousands a year before anyone even inspects you. Look at who gets paid in this chain. The insurance company collects whether or not a hurricane shows up. The state collects its submerged lands lease whether or not a single boat ties up. The bank collects the mortgage whether or not your docks just washed into the Gulf of Mexico. The only person who doesn't get paid unless the weather cooperates, the boats show up, and the water stays deep enough to float them, is you. So if the operating margins are this tight, why did Blackstone pay that much? Because the real value of a marina isn't in the operating income. It's in the dirt. There are roughly 10,000 to 12,000 commercial marinas in the United States. Coastal states have effectively stopped issuing new permits. Every marina that exists right now is one that can never be built again. This is the play private equity figured out. They buy independent marinas from aging owners at 5 to 8 times annual earnings. They raise slip rates, install electric submetering so boaters pay for their own electrical hookups at each slip instead of the marina eating the bill, and add digital booking through platforms like Docwa. They bolt on a restaurant, a pool bar, a membership-based boat rental program. Then they roll the portfolio and sell it at 14 to 21 times annual earnings. Sun Communities bought Safe Harbor for $2.11 billion in 2020. Blackstone paid $5.65 billion for it 5 years later, a 2.6 times return on marinas. They weren't buying slip revenue. They were buying 138 pieces of waterfront that the government will never allow anyone to build again. Now, the risks. And in this business, when a risk arrives, it doesn't knock. It sends a wall of water. On September 28, 2022, Hurricane Ian made landfall near Fort Myers, Florida, as a Category 4 storm with 150-mile-per-hour winds and a 15-foot storm surge. Regional maritime infrastructure damage exceeded $2 billion. Sanibel Harbor Yacht Club sustained over $11 million in damages. Legacy Harbor Marina, a 131-slip facility, was reduced to a wrecking yard, with boats destroyed or piled on top of one another. Multiple facilities across Fort Myers Beach were wiped off the map. Every dock, every pier, every utility pedestal, gone. Rebuilding takes 18 to 36 months because you need new Army Corps permits, fresh environmental reviews, dock manufacturing slots that are booked for years, and pile driving equipment that doesn't exist in sufficient supply. You're closed for 2 to 3 years. Insurance covers the structures. It doesn't cover the revenue you lost while the site sat empty. The type of dock you build determines whether you survive a hurricane or start over from nothing. Fixed timber docks in a major surge sustain 80% or greater structural loss. Heavy-duty concrete floating docks on tall steel guide pilings sustain under 10% damage in the same storm. The cost difference at installation is real. The cost difference after a Category 4 hurricane is the difference between reopening in 2 weeks and rebuilding for 2 years. Environmental enforcement is the quiet risk. A marina that pressure washes boat hulls without a closed-loop water capture system is discharging copper and lead from hull paint into the water. That's a Clean Water Act violation. Settlements run into the hundreds of thousands, plus mandatory installation of treatment systems costing $200,000 or more. And then there's the competitive shift. The private equity consolidators aren't just buying marinas, they're upgrading them into something you can't match. The safe harbor location near your market has app-controlled shore power, digital reservations, a waterfront restaurant, and a membership boat club that puts new boaters on the dock every week. Your customers didn't get stolen. They got upgraded out of your marina. You're still using a paper logbook. Let me run 2 years on the same marina. The good year. A 200-slip coastal marina on Florida's Gulf Coast. Fuel dock, repair shop, 150-rack dry stack. Occupancy at 92%. Fuel sales, $1.8 million. Repair shop, $600,000. Dry stack leases, $300,000. Gross revenue, roughly $3.2 million. After all operating costs, net operating income around $1.4 million. Subtract the loan payments and your take-home lands around $700,000. The bad year. Same marina. June brings a tropical storm that pushes a 4-foot surge through your lower docks. You close for 3 weeks. Insurance covers the damage, not the lost revenue. While you're down, 18 slip holders relocate to the safe harbor facility 2 miles south. They don't come back. Occupancy drops to 78%. Then the Florida Department of Environmental Protection shows up. Your hull wash runoff isn't being captured. Fine, $180,000. Required treatment system, $220,000. Revenue drops to $2.4 million. After loan payments and the enforcement action, your take-home shrinks to $120,000. Same marina, same water. The difference is a storm that barely made the Weather Channel, a violation you didn't know you had, and a competitor who opened while you weren't looking. So who makes it? The independent operators still profitable in 2026 share 2 traits. Slip fees are just the door charge. Fuel, repair, storage, and food and beverage make up 60% or more of their income. They built the restaurant, the bar, the paddleboard rentals, and the boat club partnership before Safe Harbor showed up in their market. By the time the PE operator moved in, they already had a reason for customers to stay. And they locked in their insurance before 2022. After Ian, Gulf Coast premiums shot through the roof overnight. Operators without long-term contracts saw insurance alone eat 12% of gross revenue. The ones who locked multi-year policies kept their cost structure intact. They also chose concrete floating docks, which meant a storm that destroyed their neighbor cost them a 2-week repair instead of a 2-year rebuild. A boat marina isn't a boating business. It's a piece of waterfront real estate that happens to have docks on it. The docks rot. The pilings crack. A hurricane can erase them in 12 hours. What doesn't disappear is the shoreline, the permits attached to it, and the fact that no one is building new ones. Every year you operate, you're not just collecting slip fees. You're sitting on a piece of land that gets more scarce, more regulated, and more valuable while you sleep. The real product was never the boat slip. It was the last mile of dry land before the water starts.